grace in your compositions, which I just love. And I'm so excited to unpick all of the consistent brilliance in your work. And over the course of this conversation, we'll of course talk about few projects, but more than that, we'll talk about your approach, your philosophy, and your journey. So, but I thought we could start with your growing up years in indoor,
Yeah.
being gradually drawn to photography, and of course going to film school. But and I read that your dad too has been an avid photographer. So yeah, talk to me about those growing up years and what your early relationship to the camera was like.
Uh, so I mean, I was in this school where you used to get one class of co-curricular activities that you could take up. And funnily enough, I had joined English dramatics as my first option back in eighth or ninth class. But then I was the only student there. So I was told by my professor that, you're the only one here, and I'm not sure what we can do because, how do you, apart from monologue, what do you do? What else would you actually engage in dramatics? So then, since my second choice was photography back then, I started with that as a weekly course that I used to take up. Mm, I learned my basics photography skills through school, and then I had joined a photography club, so to speak, which was on Facebook, where a lot of uh, some professionals, some hobbyist photographers uh, used to, go out every Sunday in and around town and do like a photo walk of sorts. So
Mm.
that's when I got introduced to wildlife photography. How does fashion work? Like, little idea of what different kind of
This is
photography
in
is.
class 9, 10, or
This
like
is in
after
ninth, 10th that this
10.
happened in school itself. And my dad was a hobbyist photographer. So avid, I don't know, but he's someone who has very less photographs of himself in the entire family album.
Mm.
And I still use his camera. Unfortunately, lost him like long back, but when I was really
Mm.
young at 6. But photography started by an accident almost. But then later, as I realized that even he was into it, it kind of became a way to be close to him in some sense through
Mm.
photography. I think emotionally, and. Then in 11th and 12th, there was a big question by my family whether you can make a sustainable living out of this, right? Because that is what is important to your parents, and I totally get it. So
Mm.
I started off picking up some freelance projects, and that was the era when DSLRs had just come in.
Mm.
And when the time like, in Bombay at that time, Ship of Thesis was being made through
Yeah.
5D and stuff, is when I was fortunate that my family made me buy, like, they got me a 5D, which I asked of them. And I started shooting some weddings. I did some portfolios of people. And because social media had just come in and Facebook was really wanting soft background
Mm.
focused photographs kind of a thing. Uh, so there was this security that came through to my family that, okay, Anand can earn money through making images. And when I was applying for my undergrad, I applied to a design school, a photography school, and a film school. How film school happened was that, again, during school, and I think in 11th is when there's this film called Youngistan
Yeah.
that
Mm.
was being shot, and that was my first experience. Of course, I've seen films growing up, right? But that was my first hand experience seeing a set. And now it now of course you've seen so much, but back then when you saw 300 people working towards a single image, I think that really, I was in awe of that
Mm.
energy. uh, and that made me want to apply to a film school and explore cinematography. And yeah, here we are. That was like a journey
You joined
that I
Whistling
took.
Woods, right?
I joined Whistling Woods. So I joined Whistling Woods in 2014, and I
Mm.
graduated from there in 2017.
Yeah, and the great Mexican DP Rodrigo Prieto once said that right after coming out of film school, in that flash of energy, excitement, and of trying to prove your skill of how great you are and doing that, he would read scripts very like a like a photographer would, like having a very fixed, predetermined idea of how it's all gonna look and how it's all gonna pan out. And over the course of many projects, he realized maybe that wasn't the right approach, and maybe he should just read on a purely emotional level the first few times when you read a script. So I thought that was very interesting. And could you talk to me like, and of course, some of the imagery will creep in when you are reading something, but talk to me, how has your relationship to encountering a script for the first few times been like and changed over the projects that you have done? And this is
So
before like conversations with directors
conversations
start.
with the
Huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
See, the process with Achal specifically has been very different, right? Because there is not a very strong script format, so to say. Right? For Gamak, we had a basic storyline. So our conversations have always been image based.
Yeah.
On the other hand, when you get a proper script, let's say for Lust Stories or for LSD or Good Luck, because there's a bounded dialogue script, it's first and foremost, I've always had an emotional reaction when I read the script, right? My idea is that I underline the emotions that are within it, or just circle out and write, this is what the character is feeling right now. And maybe once or twice some images come through or an idea comes through, so you write it down. But I generally don't go with a preconceived thought that this is how we should do it, because I feel a lot of it comes from the conversation with the directors.
Mm, mm,
And that process is the prep, right? And prep is my favorite part personally, because you really get to sit and ideate and go wild, and then you come down to sort of limiting yourself after understanding what the practicality of your ideas is or how it's working. But you can think anything that you want to think. So that process kind of is, uh, I think, really enjoyable, uh, because you get to know the person, you get to know what they like, and you understand the subtleties of
mm,
the narrative that you're supposed to do service to in some sense, right?
mm. But like, do you write a lot of notes on the script, or like, do you take those notes to the director, or like, is it like?
It's more like a personal thing where I write down my own
Mm,
notes, and then let's say with Achal, I'll start with Gamak, right? When Gamak was conceived, since it's so personal to him, it's his own village and own house that we shot in. I think the idea with him has always been a collaboration over images, over color. So there's more conversation over that, and parallelly, we're figuring out with the other writers together, because it's a tiny crew, right? So it's more intimate in that sense. We're figuring out together how the structure should flow, what should happen, and if this is happening, we have already created, like, I wouldn't say a limitation, but there's like a rule book of some kind, right? That okay, we know that we're only shooting this film static, or we know, which has evolved through the conversations, or we know that we want to now start and use some other tool to explore the character's journey. So in that sense, it's been different with Kulak, Love Stories, and LSD. It's always been that you read the script first, and then you make your own notes, thinking of what you like, what you don't like, and then you sort of have a conversation with the director. And depending on how they respond, you can then be open to this is what worked for me, this is what doesn't work for me. A lot of times it's because I've had experiences where I've read scripts and it hasn't panned out as well.
mm, mm,
uh, Maybe because sometimes they could feel that my opinions are very different and it's difficult to come on a similar page. So that also
mm,
kind of happens, right? But you always are open to a conversation of what the other is thinking, because
mm.
they have lived with the world for longer than I have. I'm just
Yeah.
probably exploring it for the first time. So I might miss out on something or misinterpret something. So I think if
Mm,
you go with a strong idea, then there, in my experience, there can be a lashback from there
yeah.
that.
So coming to like conversations with director regarding like etching out like the visual language of a film. Rodrigo also said, and I will keep quoting Rodrigo
No
multiple
problem.
times. He also said that the director DP relationship, many people say it's like a marriage, but it's more like dance partners. You pick the same music, but you have to find the right steps together. So tell me, beyond trust and key communication skills, what would you say is your ideal notion of such a relationship? And in those early conversations, while you're starting out on a project, what are few pivotal things you try and keep in mind, like try and get established right off the boat when you start conversations?
Yeah, I think being honest to the material and to yourself is really important. And that comes with time, because of course the director is vulnerable, the writer is vulnerable, so you need to find a sweet spot of how to communicate what you feel. And honestly, right, it doesn't come with a sense of judgment. I think that is really important, and that builds the friendship through the process. uh, and I feel when it comes to starting out, like how you said, Rodrigo Prieto quoted it really well, that it's a dance, but also uh, having similar aesthetics of a larger kind really
Mm,
helps. If
mm,
if the person is very different and has seen, I wouldn't say seen different films, but just in terms of process, or as a human being that they are, if you can't feel comfortable around them and feel like you can't be vulnerable to them and they're not open to being vulnerable, then it gets very difficult to sort of communicate what you honestly feel, because sometimes you feel that this is not working, but if you say it, it's not taken in a good light. So then it sort of, you have to juggle between that a
mm,
little bit, and maybe sometimes you have to show things to earn that trust. So you talk with images, you talk with references. And I don't mean visual references. They can be books, they can be literature. You respond to so many things. A lot of times I've asked directors to sort of, give me the music that they feel is a correct mood. And then that really helps, I think, because music is such a, it's a more
yeah.
universal feeling overall, right?
Mm,
So personally, I've always asked that, just give me a playlist for this if you can, or I'll make one and we can sort of figure out where to take this.
hmm. And speaking of references, like how open are you to using other movies for overt reference? Because I've heard a lot of really established cinematographers say that maybe sometimes that is not a very useful approach. Like we're looking back to few like iconic films for reference, maybe aligns your mind in a certain way, which may not be very useful for a particular film. But are you open to using movies for reference? Because
Uh,
obviously,
yeah.
huh,
No, no, say.
yeah, because obviously some influences will creep in your mind end of the day, but like do you consciously hunt out stuff when you are in a particular space and you feel like that film may share something in texture or spirit, or like do you not consciously do
Uh,
that?
I think, see, referencing comes from a mind where we, from a space where we understand that this is what's been done. Okay, and now we need to find something that is our own.
Hmm.
Let's say for Gamak, we watched Ozu, we watched Shawshank, we watched Edward
Hmm.
Yang. But
Hmm.
even then, it's not like, oh, this is the color we want. It's more of to understand a certain emotion that has been said in a film that explores similar emotions, but the images are different. So I think referencing becomes about exploring a feeling through certain ways of seeing how a color, you have responded to a certain color, or you have responded to a certain
Yeah.
texture, and whether that works for your film, or within then your aesthetic, how you can define that feeling. So it's also sometimes to understand that what not to do.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
that this has been done, so okay, you've seen 10 films, you understand a common thread of how languages function there, and then you create your own.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And like but do you take inspiration outside cinema, like photographs, paintings? those, and maybe let me.
Everything. Yeah, I think it boils down to books. It boils down to paintings, photographs, music. I think art in general, and because you can choose so much more, because the film, I think, just becomes about then those grabs or the language or the cutting. But then paintings give you a whole different way of composing because they're done differently. Literature gives you stories which are similar, so you find joy. I think as a human
Hmm,
being, also, you grow up more because you've read and understood so much more in different mediums that are expressing the same feeling.
hmm, yeah. And Rodrigo also said that like he said basically like cinematographers. I feel like he's saying that for cinematographers of probably are overrated for how a film looks, because some of it is also to the credit of costume designers, production designers, and
200%. Yeah, yeah.
and he said that cinematographers are probably undercredited for how to move a story forward. Do you agree with that?
I totally agree with that because I've had so many experiences where uh, the initial conversations have been, oh, tell us what color would you want on the wall, tell us what costume should work. And I'm like, but there are two other departments that, especially in India, I don't know, if
Yeah,
Rodrigo also feels that, then maybe it's also a thing of the West, but
yeah,
I haven't experienced that. But even in interviews where I see a lot of DP interviews, it's all about, oh, you make this image happen. And there is no cognizance of, no, it's everyone who made this happen. If I am, I think 70%, I don't want to put percentage, but a lot of percentage of my work or the image is credited to the production design, right?
yeah.
What if I'm putting a camera and a lens at a certain place, but what is in front of me is not what it should be, then how much light or how much that composition can evoke that feeling, or it's not possible. And a lot of times our job is sometimes understood as, oh, uh, just purely technical also, like in the initial conversations would be like, oh,
Uh,
so how should we move the camera here? Like, I don't know, you let's just figure out what is the emotion first, and then that will drive the movement, because
mm,
we're all servicing to a world that we're building and
mm,
not just making an image for the sake of making an image, right?
mm, mm. Yeah, because you are just ultimately supporting a narrative or a non-narrative at a particular moment, what suits it best. So, but also like at the start of a new project, on like let's say day one of a shoot, what's your mental space like? Do you ever feel like, and a lot of established DPs have said like they often feel like they're back at square one of shoot. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like you're somewhat confident and all daring to go?
I am super anxious on day one of shoot. Yeah, I think because I have always remember I can't sleep a day before shoot, especially if it's the first day,
Mm-hmm.
because you haven't really done what all you've thought, and then there's this entire spiral going on in your head with some scenes that you might be shooting the next day coming in your head and being like, oh, now this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to look like, and because you're prepping, you're going closer to that idea somehow. But day one of set is always, I think, the most anxiety driven for me personally, because you're like, oh, what if it can be anything. What if the lights I've ordered are not enough? What if my image is not making me feel that way? Because it's, and especially with the first time you're collaborating with a new director, it's more anxious driven. Right
Yeah,
now with Achal, since it's a whole different setup and we've worked so much together,
you found a
it's
shorthand.
a,
Yeah,
we found a shorthand. And also, I mean, uh, the structure and the system of working is very different as compared to what Bombay has to offer,
yeah.
where it's on, like, like you're constantly at it. But I think it personally frees me more shooting in Darbhanga and shooting with Achal, because you are in a calmer, softer space uh, in terms of being on a set.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, most of the time shoots have pretty tight schedules. and all of you will come with certain plans in place, but also filmmaking is so much about troubleshooting, I would imagine. How do you, and like you have to constantly think on your feet as you go. How do you handle stress and anxiety on a set?
Uh, I think it's changed from over the past 5, 6 years of shooting.
Hmm.
I was an angry guy when I started off because
You were an angry guy.
I was angry in the sense that all your stress or your difficulties used to project in the form of anger. Now, I think slowly after realizing that a lot of things are not in your hand, so
Hmm.
you can't really. I can't really push if it starts to rain and it's a sunny day. I can't do anything. There's no point of projecting, rushing or anger. You can just like calmly sit and wait either for the sun to come because you want the sun, or you can have a conversation with the director where you change the way that we had imagined the mood to be to accepting what we're getting. So I
Yeah.
think now it's become very solution oriented in that sense. That if we are facing this and we can't do this, okay, let's see how we can sort of tackle that and get down with it. A lot of stress on more studio sets is also handled by, of course, the chief AD. They are responsible for making sure that everything that the director, the PD, the costume, the DP, the camera team sort of needs creatively is executed. So I think production and the direction team plays a large role in facilitating to reduce that stress. So
Hmm.
that solution also comes from them because in the end, I can't go and speak to the police if they've messed up my suit. I can't do anything about it. So not my monkey, not my circus is a great way to go sometimes.
But do you feel you have got a lot calmer on sets now compared to
Yeah, for sure. But I think that also comes with, you're right
with?
out of film school, you expect
Yeah,
people to work a certain way, and you have not really seen how things happen. The more you see, the more you sort of understand, and you can maybe empathize
yeah.
with different situations.
Hmm. Now, in today's day and age, when there is so much like visual overstimulation all the time, and this just barrage of images hitting you left, right, and center, do you at any point feel a little overwhelmed by all that, or like do you feel like more encumbered in creating images that are vivid and distinctive, or like how do you cut off that noise and just focus on making images that suit a story? Do you at all feel like overwhelmed by that, or like?
Yeah, it's overwhelming. It is really overwhelming because you open Instagram first thing in the morning and you're doom scrolling for like 5 minutes, and then you realize that you don't even remember sometimes what you've seen or what you've not seen. It's
No,
just like constant swiping. So I
it is.
think slowing down, like I've been reading a lot right now. That is really helping me to think of images rather than seeing images. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like because it's a different medium, so you are imagining a scene and you're imagining a light, or you're imagining the situation and then you're working around it. So I think just slowing down in that sense helps a lot, but still, I mean, you're doom scrolling every other day and it really gets overwhelming sometimes. But there is
Yeah.
no need to there I never felt that there's a need to sort of feel that I need to be distinctive from what is happening because
Hmm.
I'm doing what I'm doing, and what I feel is honest to that certain story time situation. Uh, so even if it looks like some other film, I know in my head that I've been honest to it because you can draw parallels for so many images. I mean, the history of images starts from when it's been so many years that you will find some certain parallel, but I don't think one should be uh, shouldn't have a sense of underconfidence that this has been done. Unless you're
Hmm.
outrightly copying it and you know it somewhere and you're lying to yourself, then it's a separate thing, you know.
Then it's a mess, yeah. Coming to the collaborations with Achal, for Dwayne, he has said like how it wasn't really like elaborately pre-planned in terms of like frames, shots, and how the visual language will be. And he, Abhinav, and you were pretty much trying out various stuff on the go and being wholly open to situations when there is so much like freedom of shooting, malleability, adaptability, just looseness. You and like other stuff you try to be super mindful of, or like you need to have these things in place when you start.
So with Duhin, in respect to Duhin, we finished uh, filming in a period of 30 days. And when I mean filming, it means from prepping to shooting,
Huh.
uh, right? Writing was, of course, being done before, but also kind of parallel. So what happens is, uh, since you have so much time uh,
Mm.
when shooting with Achal, that there is no pressure to make mistakes,
Yeah.
in the sense that there is always an opportunity that one can go back. And so it's almost shooting analog, right? In the sense that uh, you shoot, you see in the night what you've done, then you think about whether what we've done works for us or not, and then you go back again and do it if it doesn't work or if it does work.
Hmm.
Um so it's us responding to our own images, taking time to understand whether this works in a larger way of doing things or not. Of course, there is planning in the sense that we know that we have a tripod. We knew that we had a gimbal, let's say for Dhuin, right? And then as we were building the scenes, because the process is like you go to that space, Abhinav, Achal, and the other actors involved are sort of building the scene, and at the same time, when they are improvising, I am looking at possibilities of angles with Achal, seeing what time we can shoot, what not shoot, and how to sort of go about the scene depending on how they are, responding to that. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. I remember on the way that we had planned that we will also use just tilt ups this time. Let's see how we can tilt the camera and explore something. But the tilt
Hmm.
wasn't working with the tripod that we had, unfortunately. So then we had to figure to only do pans. So when
Hmm.
I'm panning, I can't even tilt, like go like this. I have to
Hmm.
go like this. So then that limitation defined a lot of shots.
Yeah.
Uh, but it's those limitations that make you want to create more, right? If you have 10 tools on set to move the camera in 10 different ways without actually thinking why you want to do it, then you'll just move the camera. I mean,
Yeah.
if I have a dolly, I have a jib, I have a steady cam, I have a car rig, I have everything, then you sometimes want to do it because you're like, oh, let's try this tool. But then that doesn't come from an honest intention. So when
Hmm.
I said earlier that you have a rule book for every film,
Hmm.
that rule book is kind of limiting you to be in that certain structure so that there is some kind of consistency through the film. Then be it lensing, color, light, movement, anything.
Hmm. Now, contrasted with this, when I assume there was a like a very precise script for the mirror, like even while watching it, I feel it's like this very super chiseled film with the director having a very super specific understanding of where to place a beat and exact camera movement and navigating the space of Ishita's apartment or Seema's place. Uh, Talk to me at what stage of pre-production you came in, what your conversations with Konkona were like, and how. And I will get to more stuff later. But yeah, this it was a
Uh,
pre-production.
yes.
Hmm.
So I think I came in like maybe 35, 40 days before shoot, where they had maybe the second or the third draft ready for the script.
Hmm.
Initial conversations were about the idea of understanding how exhibitionism works or how voyeurism works, and to not be ashamed of it, right? Because there's so much taboo, especially in India, around it. And I have also not grown up in a family where we openly talk about all of these things. So
mm,
it was quite liberating for me as an experience where I could have a conversation about this and not be judgmental of myself for saying that
mm, mm, mm,
in that sense, right? In terms of just what different ways they could have sex.
mm.
I mean, there was an entire docket I remember where we had jotted down sex positions for various
Expeditions, yeah.
types. And it was a collaboration of everyone. It was Konkona Pooja, who's the writer, Disha, who's the
Uh-huh.
associate director, me, sitting and figuring out that, okay, we've written they're having sex, but what are they actually doing? At what
Yeah.
stage are they? Who's on top of each other? And stuff like
Mm,
this. So I think in that sense, that was really liberating for me because then my shyness or that kind of opened up me a little bit. And always there was a conversation about space, right? Tilotma, who's playing Ishita's character, lives in a certain class. Amrita Subhash, who's playing Seema, lives in a certain class. And how they both inhabit their spaces is very important, wherein you see that Seema is taking care of a space that is not her own,
mm,
but still has a certain, I wouldn't say right, but a certain sense of authority is also like a really strong word. I can't find the right word, but a certain sense of being because it's so normal for us also.
mm,
Like I have my house help at home who takes care of my house because we're shooting for so long or we're out, and they really treat my space as their own. That's
mm.
how they
Yeah.
take care of it. So I think for me that was a very interesting dynamic that was in the writing, that we're not judging these people of who they are. We're just seeing them as human beings, and we can empathize with both of them equally because we
Mm,
understand in a scene where there's the confrontation where despite they both know that they're watching each other, but because of this third person
yeah.
being present, they can't
They have to enact it.
accept.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, they have to enact and they go back to their instincts of being a
Yeah.
house help and being like
The
a
conditioning, basically.
the
Yeah.
conditioning, right? And then that breaks. So I think that is the most beautiful part of it. And when I came in the script earlier, I remember that the script had this the last scene where the vegetable vendor is. It was earlier a longer scene where a police cop comes and he harasses the vegetable seller, and then
Oh.
these three women sort of fight over him, and then the key exchange happens. But
Uh,
but somehow whenever all of us read it, we were all not sure about why it's not working for us. But then with time, with prep, we figured that, oh, we're again placing a trope of women winning over men instead of just
uh,
these two women accepting that they both like to see each other, and that is what is more important.
mm,
So Konkana ke saath yaar, actually it was the most joyous experience I've had in a long time, like especially here in Bombay, because again the same thing that I spoke about earlier, that I could be vulnerable to her. I could see her as a friend where, I can speak about anything. And it could sound stupid. It could not sound stupid, but I was never judged for it because
open space
there was
to.
always neutral space to sort of
Mm,
just be.
mm. Do you feel like she had a very specific visual eye, like of how to just execute
She
that?
did.
And
In the
mm,
script itself, a lot of things were written, I would say, in the sense that there's this entire one single shot
gosh,
kind of a
yeah.
thing, right?
Huh, huh.
Where Tirotman comes from the door, and then we see her coming through the days, and
Mm-hmm.
it was called the morning montage, I think. That's how we that's how we coined it. That is the morning montage. It was written in the script, right? It was written
uh,
as a long take, and she had imagined it as a long take. Although the way it was written was that we go to the mirror every time because mirror is where they're experiencing
huh,
each
huh,
other, right?
yeah.
But then as we saw locations and as the idea evolved, I strongly felt that it's too. I don't want to see the space here. I just want to see them. So panning through
Mm-hmm.
the space to the mirror every time and coming back would a be longer for the short film, that because there's certain duration
Ah.
we need to work in,
Mm-hmm.
and it would be mildly boring, like I see Tilotma enter, then you pan, and the mirror is on the other end. Then I see Amrita, and I see the husband, and then you go back, and then you see her. So there's so much of time in that pan in the middle where
Becomes
nothing
more
is
drawn
happening.
out. Yeah.
It becomes more
Mm-hmm.
drawn out where nothing is happening. So there is no change in that sense. So then
Mm-hmm.
we came to the parallel thing, and in the end, because we wanted to go to the mirror, because now we are seeing what Tilotma sees, then that even story wise made a lot of sense, you know.
That's just such a brilliant film, but yeah, but like not all directors may have a sharp visual eye like Konkona. How do you prepare in those situations?
Uh, See, my experience, I've had the chance to work with maybe two kind of directors, in the sense that there are some people, and that happens even in advertising, because I do so much advertising sometimes, that you have directors which would want to only concentrate on performances.
Hmm.
They want to, and they're upfront about it, right? They don't pretend that oh nahi, ye shot, they leave it to you, the production design, the costume stylist, to sort of build the look of the film or the world of the film. And that is also fun, but I personally enjoy the other side more, where the conversations are driven emotionally but also through images, because then
Hmm.
it's more challenging to give them something new, because they're already thought of something, right, in terms of
Hmm.
image. So you also feel pushed a little bit in a certain direction, and the collaboration, I feel, is more enriching,
Hmm.
because you know that they won't settle for something shit.
Yeah.
you know because they also have high standards of image making in that sense.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
and then you also want to live up to that and just do better than you did previously. I think
Hmm.
with me personally, sometimes when I've only shot with, I don't know if I'll get jobs after this, but if I've only shot with people who concentrate really on performances, and we haven't had the best conversation in terms of images, you also feel lost sometimes a little. I think with experience that might change. But when I earlier started on, because it was a film school journey where you are taught to also think in images, etc., etc., and some other directors come from a very different journey and space, right? So they approach uh, film in a way where they would understand edit and they would understand performances. But what about the form? And
Yeah.
form, because it's the most important thing. I feel
Hmm.
stories, a lot of stories have been told already, and I don't remember where I read this, but I read in film school. I can't remember. I'm very bad with names. That there are only 36 stories to tell.
Hmm.
So after that, it's about the craft and the form of the medium, right? And that is what is fun to explore.
You've shot quite a few commercials. Do you feel you have to employ like a different muscle on those? And what I mean by those, obviously, beyond a basic approach, are there like practical things that you've learned from doing those that you found useful in maybe doing narrative films?
I think the most useful part is that, uh, especially for photography or photography for any other craft, the more you do it, the better you get at it in some sense, right? Because advertising gives you the scope to practice your craft a lot.
Hmm.
Because you are put up in so many different situations through the day, and you need to be really fast about it. So
Hmm.
the best part or my outtake from advertising is that I get to practice my craft. I get to experiment with tools which otherwise I wouldn't, because they have the money to get me those tools.
Hmm.
So it has helped me to use less slides on my narrative films, basically, because I know I can do it in less after having the experience of doing it in more.
Hmm.
So that has really that's why I keep going back to doing them. Apart from, of course, earning my bread and butter, but that's the practical side of it. But just in terms of uh, how many situations you put into, and you need to shoot so much within a day, that you get better about making choices or about dealing with different lighting situations or different scenarios every time. And touchwood, even the advertising that I've mostly shot is narrative based in that sense. It's not a
Mm,
very like I don't get calls for a fair and lovely uh, studio kind of a thing. I get called for something that is on a live location or
mm,
it's out on the street, and I feel that's much better because you respond to the environment a lot more as opposed to working in a studio
mm,
where I don't know, it's clinical in some sense, right?
mm, mm.
So touchwood till now, been lucky in that sense.
And there was obviously this very beautiful, sublime obul. How does your way of looking get like? Did your way of looking get altered at all by the fact that it's an iPhone film, or like do you have
So
similarity in
the
the way you're looking?
no, I feel the initial conversations Faraz and I had, I told him that uh, let's not think we're shooting on an iPhone.
Hmm.
We're shooting on a camera which has its own quirks and limitations. So once you forget that you're shooting on an iPhone, then you're just shooting a film. Then whether it's an Addy, an iPhone, Sony, all that comes secondary, and then you make certain choices according to the limitations that that tool has to provide you.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
So I think that gave us a lot of restraint. Otherwise, iPhone, suddenly you feel like you can run with it, you can throw it, nothing will happen. You can go around, do something like Children of Men. I don't know, because
Hmm.
it's such a light tool, like literally it's here. You can do
Hmm.
anything with it. So I think once I told Faraz that let's think of it as just a camera and not an iPhone, that really restrained the language of Ubud uh, the way that it is right now. Because we are providing a service, um, annotation again, but we are providing our thought of making an image for a film. So the process really doesn't change apart from understanding what the tool can do.
Hmm. But like once you go into post production and the color grading starts, and you have had one of the most brilliant colorists, Meher Gupta, do so many of
Hmm.
your films. What is your equation with the images at that point? Do you feel you still have got control over the image? Like, talk to me about that degree of involvement you like to be in on that stage of post production.
Okay. So it's been different with Mehak as well because when the first time I had an experience with Mehak was, there's this short film by Ajit Pal Singh called Ramat Gamat.
Yeah, yeah, huh.
So Tojo Xavier has shot it, and I was doing some patchwork when it was before Gamak. I was doing some patchwork for it, and Tojo told me that hey, you can come to the grading studio, and that was my first time meeting Mehak, and I was so much in awe of her because she came from a space of always feeling what she's feeling and then grading. It's never like we should put these colors on it, which is so
Hmm.
much a process that I also am a believer of that, you don't come with a preconceived idea, but you feel this and then you have a conversation over it. So when Gamak happened, I had shown her stills of, that this is what we've shot and I really want you and Achal and I really want you to, sort of grade it. And we didn't know much about grading. I have had very just one experience in film school about grading, which was in Prasad Labs for my diploma film. So it was a very open. I went with a very open mind to her, and then she brought a lot to the table for Gamaghar. And then after Gamaghar, it's always been that now we have a conversation with her before we start the film. So
Ah,
the control of image
it
is
starts much
coming
earlier.
from
Huh.
there because I have realized that she's again a storyteller and she has a certain way of looking at color. And if we have that conversation early on, then we can incorporate that along with the production designer and the costume
Hmm.
for a certain look because she does it so much that she knows that if you choose this yellow or if this might not work. So that conversation happening earlier is really helpful. Uh, and when it comes to post production, uh, Mehak and I are just two good friends there. We see the same problems in the image, and there has never been any conflict so far, touch wood, And it's always that she would bring something more that you never thought can happen with your image, uh, to to a level where you feel more connected emotionally, and also it technically looks spectacular.
But that that of course is the relationship you have with Meg. But let's say for other colorists you may go on to work with, how do you like would you like to be involved with at that stage?
So it's the same process, right? I mean, see, there is no control over image. Starting
Hmm.
from prep to sorry, starting from prep to shoot to post, there are so many things that are beyond your control,
Hmm.
right? Anything can go wrong on set, and
Good
something,
point.
there are happy accidents, there are bad accidents. So, in respect to control of image, I really don't have that ego. I think it's an image that is being made by 100 people, 400 people. That's what my initial thought of seeing a first film set was, and I think that idea is really seeped in deep inside me, right? Where,
Hmm.
which I told earlier. So with other colorists, in that sense, you have to understand that every person is getting something to the table that is their personal aesthetic. Now you need to just again be uh, open to that aesthetic and see if it's servicing the story or not. If it's
Yes.
not doing justice to the story, then you can speak to them and they'll be happy to change it or not change it. But you have to always find a middle ground uh, for that. I don't think as a DP you can be like, नहीं यही सही है, क्योंकि कोई दूसरा इंसान भी 40 साल से या 30 साल से काम कर रहा है. मतलब मेरा कितना ही एक्सपीरियंस है, आई हैव बीन वर्किंग फॉर 5 years. But the
Hmm.
colorists that I've collaborated with, apart from Mehak, have been working for 30, 35 years, and they have an eye which is much more trained for what they do.
I do.
So you need to respect that and you need to sort of trust that.
Is there a community of fellow DPs you feel you can really lean on for support, for suggestions, for guidance?
I think it's a very tiny community, and I don't think it's a community of DPs in that sense, but I have
Yes.
like a tribe of my own that can be honest. But those are my friends, Uh, I haven't found a space wherein there are DPs who are not my friends professionally, sort of uh, critique or comment on how things are done.
Hmm.
Uh, in the sense of getting feedback for work, there is always a community if you want something. Like, there is there are WhatsApp groups, there is Instagram where DPs are open to help other DPs out. In that sense, this is what I'm thinking. I'm stuck here. What do you think I can do? Can I get this grip? Or, can you suggest, because you did that there, that I want to try something similar? Should I be mindful of something? So, in that sense, there is that space, but you have to kind of build it for yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like, uh, because you're in and around the circle and you have access to certain people. So, you need to build that access through work or through just
Hmm.
the relationships that you make.
Hmm.
Otherwise, there is no space as such. Like, there is not a
Yeah.
forum or that kind of a space. And that access has only come with time. Uh, you know,
Okay. Yeah. Is there a shot or a scene in a recent Indian film that really took your breath away?
is there a short or a scene in a recent? I haven't seen any Indian film in a long time,
In a
honestly.
long time. Because of why?
Yeah. Just
What?
I haven't been able to, like, go to the theaters or whatever. Uh, so any contemporary film I'm not sure of, but uh, within the iPhone series, my personal favorite is Jaltu, and I think
Like,
Jaltu has Jaltu Jalaltu has some really breathtaking. I love the opening of the film, to be honest, where
Mm,
you see this man traversing through the factory. Is a my personal favorite opening in that sense in the long time.
nice. But you also said you have been reading a lot. Can I have some recommendations?
Yeah, recommendation. I mean, here and there, thankfully, I live with friends who have a lot of books that have got me into books in the past 4 5 years. Right now, I read this one book called Ganja and Mahua Chronicles, which is basically about a Gond artist and his life. It's like an autobiographical with anecdote essays in his drawings. That's a
Mm,
book. It's like an artist memoir of sorts, right?
mm,
So uh, that's one of the books that I really enjoyed reading. Fiction, I read Cuckold by Kiran Nagarkar, which is
mm,
Indian uh, history, but fictionalized during the time of basically the story of Meera, who is
mm,
Krishna's, and during that time, I can't remember the exact period right now, but Cuckold by Kiran Nagarkar was really good. Uh, then I've been rereading like Lessons with Kiarostami and some film books, which I think it's like 101 film books kind of a thing.
mm.
And yeah, pretty much this much.
Yeah,
Cuckold was a big
pretty,
600-page book,
pretty,
so
pretty eclectic. So,
yeah.
yeah, I know there's Achal's next feature, Ritu and Tenzin's film, but can you tell us anything about these films or any other projects that are in the pipeline? I don't think
Um, I mean,
we can.
this is it. I mean, Achil's film is almost there. We're getting into post production now, and the Two Intentions films is something we finished 2 days ago. Because it's a part of an anthology. So there were other four filmmakers who've made it together. And right now, there is nothing that I'm actually taking up in terms of a long format. So there's no project that
Mm,
I'm
okay.
doing at the moment.
Okay, that's all. This was very interesting. Thank you for your time, and I'm just beyond
Thank you
excited to
so
see
much.
all the cool
Yeah,
stuff that you have in store for us. And I hope we can talk again.
for sure, for sure. Thank you so much. It was lovely to speak to you.